Hi, everyone. Jessica with Martin Management here. I have Mary joining me today, Mary Fisher Day of the Dental Business. And I'm super excited to have her on because we've known each other for maybe 2 years now, probably something like that. And I just feel so, I guess, passionate about what she does because it's one of those things that if something were to happen, worst case scenario, she's there to pick up the pieces. I just had somebody on Facebook on like one of the dental groups I was in mentioned something yesterday that a tragic situation had happened in their community, and she was wondering if her husband should get involved. He's a dentist, and I definitely tagged you in it and was like, "Oh my gosh, have her talk to Mary because I'm
Thank
sure
you.
when people go through tragic things, they don't know where to turn." And so, Mary, thank you so much for being here today. I'm excited to have you share what you do and how you help people, and how you kind of got into this line of work, doing practice transition advising, but as well as helping in those emergency situations where something catastrophic happens. And now, what do we do with this dental business that we have, and how do we keep things flowing and whatnot? So, yeah,
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
yes. So,
Excuse the Southern accent for all of you who,
oh, I love it. I
no,
have
thank
that Midwest. I don't think it's cute. So
oh,
Southern one's very nice.
I like it. Thank you so much. So, well, what I do now is I'm a practice transition advisor. I have a background in practice management consultant as well as I was clinical for 17 years and was an office manager. And I worked with Henry Schein Practice Transitions for 10 years, right at 10 years. And since 2018, I've been doing my own thing. And I've found that in the marketplace of dentistry, I feel like there's a couple of areas that have little holes in them, and that's personal transition advisor for the dentist who wants to purchase or sell. You get your broker, of course, and a broker is, and it depends on who you get with a broker. Some brokers are very hands-on, and some are just, let me get this sold for you, and that's what their job is, and that's what. But I realize that it's the most important decision in your careers are buying and selling a practice, other than going to dental school. Buying and selling your practice are the other two most important decisions in your career. And I understand the weight of that. And while working as a practice broker with Henry Schein, I realized that was my niche, was hand holding,
Mhm.
for a lack of a better way to say it. And it's needed. It's needed. You need somebody who has your back. So that's what I do. I
Yeah.
have I do buyer's rep and seller's rep, never together. I would
Mhm.
there's I don't believe in dual representation myself. I know so it works for some, but not for me. I've seen too many people think they were being represented and it didn't go there, like that.
No,
So
that's
that's
so
what I
great.
do as far as buyers and sellers rep.
Yes. And I think there's so many emotions that tie into that when you sell a practice. So it's so great for you to be involved and really be that kind of sounding board, that voice of reason. You've seen all these transactions, over the course of your career, where for a lot of dentists, they probably only have one or two of those types of transactions, maybe just one, right? So to have that expertise is really invaluable for what you've seen and how you can help people through that emotional piece of it personally as well.
Yeah, I've assisted in one way or another with hundreds of practice transitions. So, and they're not all ancient either. This goes back to as recent as 2009 for me. That's how
Mhm.
many I've done since then. And I do practice valuations as well, as you know that.
Yeah.
But so it's just a huge passion of mine to make sure that each dentist I doesn't have buyer's remorse. If they buy a practice, I want them to understand what they're buying. And then when I'm representing a seller, I'm very cognizant about protecting their legacy and the value of their practices. Those are the two most important things to me. I mean, I want the transition to be smooth. Transitions are what they are. I try to
Right.
help them navigate, but protecting the value of that practice and their legacy is paramount to me.
And we're going to get into the story you originally told me that like captured my heart and I was like, oh my gosh, if that were to happen in my life, I can't imagine what we would do. We'll get into that, some of the emergency type support that you provide. But I want to go back to something you just said about representing, not having buyer's remorse, not letting the seller be sure that they have their ducks in a row so that their legacy can continue. At what point would you say it's important for people to start getting involved with someone like you? If they're like, I want to sell my practice in, I don't know, 7 years, 5 years, 2 years, like what is a good timeline for them to start working with someone like yourself to really start putting those ducks in a row and getting things set up for that?
I think it's a good idea to schedule a consult with someone like me. You don't have to work with me, but have pay for a 30-minute consult with someone, who can advise you. I don't think you need to bring on a consultant to help you at that point, and unless there's problems. Now, someone like me can look at the reports we're going to talk about and tell you, okay, you do have time to build this practice up, and this is what you need to do. Okay.
Mhm.
And if it's not me who helps you, we all have a network of consultants that are good friends and have their special areas of expertise. So when you make that decision, that's the time to make a call or send an email to someone like me just for a consult. And my first consults are always free,
Mhm.
but then so that's not an issue. But yeah, I think that's it, because there's important things to know, like at what point do you not buy any more major equipment?
Right.
Will you not, you're not going to recoup the value. There's things like that that are important to know.
Right. And you've shared too with me on other calls that we've done that it's important to have evaluations done throughout the course of the career, not just like right when you purchase something and right at the end, right? To kind of make sure along the way you're keeping things where you want them to be. I'm not sure. I'm probably not articulating well why you would want to do that, but that's important. And probably most people don't think of that as well.
No, and I think it's important to have a baseline and definitely keep it up every 3 to 5 years.
Mhm.
And but in case, like we talked about, something does happen, they've got a baseline, but also it tells you the health of your practice. You It's amazing how I would say 95% of dentists have no idea, dental practice owners have no idea what their practice is worth.
Mhm.
You think, well, it should be, everybody's saying 75% of last year's, that's no, it's not how it's done. It's worth what somebody's going to pay, first of all. Second of all, you need somebody in there to value and who can back up that value for you, because oftentimes it's more than 75%. It So why cut yourself out of 10% to save, from having a valuation?
Sure. Well, and then there's the whole, so most of my work is with private practice doctors. Um, you hear stories though about the DSOs, giving private practice owners like 3 times what the practice is worth in like the private sector, to scoop up these practices. Like, is that true, or what do you know about that kind
I
of?
know too much about that. Okay, so yes, they will tell you, you'll receive a letter that says, this is what I will give you. First of all, you've got to be above that $1 million mark for them to even look at you, pretty much. Second of all, they make you all these promises. And I'm not saying that no one has ever done this, but I've never seen a DSO pay a dentist 100% at closing what they told them they were going to pay them. Okay.
Mm.
There's holdbacks. So there's holdbacks for 5 years oftentimes. And oftentimes they require that you take up to 30% of of what you're going to be paid on the practice and invest it back into their company.
Oh.
Yeah, that's very common right now. And then the other 20% may be paid out over so many years if you meet their,
The criteria.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's rare. It's rare. And there's always holdbacks.
Mhm.
Always holdbacks and there's creative ways for them to do it. Some people like the holdbacks, but that's a whole nother story. How you're paid is completely different than what it's going to be like when you get in there working for them, because they're not going to hire you. They're not going to buy that practice unless you're staying on for 3 to 5 years.
Right. And then you're at
a
the
deal.
mercy of whatever's done, decided, all those things, and you lose complete control.
You have no control even on over supplies and equipment oftentimes. I
Mhm.
see dentists go from owning their own practice for 40 years to working for somebody and being questioned about the type of material they've ordered. It's
Mhm.
heartbreaking. That's not protecting your legacy.
Right.
You know, there's
Absolutely.
other ways to do it. I'm not saying they're all bad. I think there probably are some really good ones, but I can say I've never seen anybody say, I'm going to give you 4 times EBITDA, and they gave them 4 times EBITDA at closing. I've never seen that happen
Right. Okay. Well, that's
personally.
great to know, Mary. Thank you. So, so the story you had told me initially about how you help people in emergency situations, will you share that too? Because I think that's not that, not that anybody wants to think about the worst case scenario happening, but I think it's important to share because it's something we don't think about. It's something we don't want to think about, but it's really important to get those ducks in a row and be sure we're prepared to protect the value of the practice, to protect the team, the spouse, whoever's involved.
Right. Well, as you know, I've written a couple of books. When I was finishing the first book, and it was during my practice management phase when I owned practice management consulting, and it's called The Dental Business: A Blueprint for Success. I was towards the end of writing it, and about this time of year, maybe September of 2016, and I'm writing, and then I see this news blurb about a plane crash, and I knew people who were attending the Dentsply Sirona conference. Okay, and that year I believe it was in Orlando, and so I saw a plane crash coming with people coming back from that conference, and so of course I clicked on it, and come find out it was a private plane owned by a dentist, and there was a dentist flying it, but there were, and his wife and 2 other couples. Between the 6 people, there were 4 dentists in the plane and 2 spouses, and they all died. And they were all, I would say, late 30s, early 40s. And between them, they left 11 children orphaned. That still blows my mind. 7 dental practices between them. And I went in and I did the research myself to try to figure out how many staff members, at least 35 to 37 staff members with no, what do I do now? And then I saw that there was a GoFundMe page set up for some of the children to help them, help take care of them, to make sure they had clothes and food and everything. And no parent wants that. No parent wants that. That's not why you and your husband worked your tail off. You know, no parent wants that. So I knew about certain letters of instruction and stuff, but I wanted something more comprehensive than anything I'd seen. So I drafted and have spent some time working and built an emergency directive so that you can put all the information you need in this document, and it tells where other things are you need. You've used it.
Yeah.
And my goal in that is, so if anybody goes on a trip and this happens to them, their children can be taken care of, and taken care of quickly. Or the spouse, what if the spouse isn't with them? Spouse, your heart's destroyed because you've lost your spouse, and you're trying to explain it to them. You don't have the bandwidth to deal with selling a dental practice. Can I keep these people employed? How do I keep paying them? Blah, blah, blah. It's all in this document. And another thing is it allows you to control a large portion of the transition of your dental practice, whether you're here or not, because you've got it in writing how you want it transition. As you noticed at the bottom, there's a place to put notes. This is how I want things done. I mean, you can say in there, I don't want to sell to a DSO. You can say in there, I'm good with selling. You can say anything in there because it's your wishes.
Right.
So,
And I think it's so important. I know you and I've talked at length about this, that, you need to have something in place that's clear enough so that if that spouse, is still around, they're able to pass it off to, an attorney, an accountant, a trusted friend, someone that can think clearly, that can make business decisions on behalf of the couple and keep things moving in a positive direction versus just that state of panic and overwhelm that I would think would be there without something like that in place of who does what and where is this and who do I contact for that. I can't even imagine. I'm not having gone through the directive that you've shared with me, and just having those things ready, so that, not that you ever expect anything like that to happen, but if it were to, we at least know things would be taken care of as best as possible. Yeah,
Well,
so it's so wonderful you've developed this.
oh yeah, and there's all kinds of ways to use. I do think it's important if you're going to do this, and I don't know if you've done this yet, but to determine who you're going to use as your executor. Somebody who loves you and who loves you, your family, and loves you, but maybe not will be so devastated that they can't think straight. That's who I would pick as an executor, not a parent, maybe a sibling, depending. Some siblings, I've got a brother that would keep his head about him. I've got another brother who's more emotional, so there's things, like that, but just choose wisely and don't make it one of your children either, your adult children, because the decisions won't be made on an intellectual level. They'll be made on an emotional level. Plus,
we're talking about potentially millions of dollars at stake, right? Depending on the size of the practice and the scale of the team and all of that and all the equipment. And I know you had shared with me a startling statistic about, if, let's say, you don't have a directive like this, where you can continue to try to get the business rolling, to try to get it sold quickly, you don't have things in order, the value of the practice starts to diminish dramatically each day, each week.
It's 5 to 15% per week is the rule of thumb per week. And that's when, and I know we're all human, but that's when some would say the vultures come out and they're like, Mrs. Martin, let me take that patient base off your hand. That way you won't have to worry about it. I'm just down the street. I've seen widows do that. They didn't know that that's where the main value of the practice, they thought it was the equipment and that is heartbreaking. And then they come in and nitpick and pick, equipment and all of that. And it's, again, human nature. And, I can't speak to whether, I think the dentist who offered to take the patient base off the hand probably knew what they were doing, but I can't say for sure, that they knew that you're taking this widow's, inheritance.
Yeah.
You're taking the legacy of her husband.
I've heard of communities, especially, those that are tight knit, or those that, where the dentist is affiliated with professional organizations in their community, like study clubs and things, where if something catastrophic happens to the doctor, other dentists will come step in and work in the clinic, one day a week here, and they'll kind of try to band together to keep the practice going, to keep the team employed, to keep things moving until a sale can occur. Would you say, and that sounds great in theory, but then if you think about like the devil's advocate side of it, what if someone does come in with ill intentions and is coming in to, help, but, the guise of helping, but then hoping that those patients that they meet will then transfer to their practice at some point? Like, how do you avoid some of, like you said, there's vultures out there. How would you avoid that? Or, and you'd want to try to accept the help that people are trying to offer, but how would you know, I guess, if that's a true intention in those types of situations?
I think that's incredibly difficult to do. But if you are a part of a study group or anything, just surround yourself with people you trust, is the only thing. When you were saying that, I was going back to my dad. I was hearing my dad in my ear. Surround yourself with people of like-minded trust, so.
And that's something, I'm heavily involved in our practice. So we've talked about this kind of stuff as well, because we've gone through the directive as well. But that even could be something you put in the directive. Like, these are the doctors in town or within this area that I would wholeheartedly trust our patients with if we needed to, bring some people in to help support. And these are the ones I wouldn't, right? Because like, as a spouse that's not heavily involved in the business, you might not know. And you might just be like, sure, great, come on in and help us out in this time of need. And it could be malicious, unfortunately.
It is. And you're in the huge minority of spouses that you are involved in the practice. I would say probably 90% of spouses aren't. whether they're male or female. So you've got a huge upper hand that way, whether you think it or not. No, probably wasn't your plan to be.
No, it wasn't. No, but and it's funny because I think, I've thought through this. We've talked about this enough that I've thought like, okay, if something happened, I know enough to keep the practice going. Like I know how it runs. I know what needs to be done. I know how to, I could do everything that needed to be done cognitively, but in that emotional state, I think I'd be in a ball. Like I wouldn't be any help.
And then you put the children in. You think about your children and how I've seen spouses think, okay, I think I can do this. Let me just try to do. And then the children are falling apart. And as a mom,
Yeah.
you're not worried about keeping the doors open. You're worried about putting your arms around those children and keeping them safe and making sure they have all their needs. And, I know how that is. And yeah, I think no one's, unless you just truly don't like your spouse.
There's probably that happens
Yeah.
probably, but
hopefully
not.
but unless you truly don't like that spouse, you need to find somebody you can trust with certain decisions. It doesn't mean they can't come to you with major ones and ask you, all right, is it okay if I start showing the practice? And then you've got the list of people, things you don't want and all of that.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Important.
Well, it's so wonderful the work you're doing, Mary. I appreciate you so much and coming on with me today and sharing with the larger group here of what you're doing. If someone's interested in learning more about the emergency directive or just what you do with, transition advising, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Just honestly, send me an email at mary@thedentalbusiness.com. So it's just like it's written here under my name, The Dental Business. So it's thedentalbusiness.com, mary@thedentalbusiness.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And anybody, if you're listening and you want to chat with Mary, I really highly encourage you to do so. She is just lovely and easy to talk to. And you must have like a counseling, like vibe background, something, because you're just good with people and you have that empathy. We were on another call this morning and we were talking about strength.
It's up there high.
Yeah, empathy is very high for you. So you're good hands to hold when people are going through those tough things. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, my friend. Have a great day. Thank you for having me.
You too.
All right. Bye.
I can't stop the recording. The buttons changed.